Giving this wonderful presentation this afternoon is Dale Verstegen, a Senior Research Associate at Transcend. Mr. Verstegen is assigned to a range of research, training, and technical assistance projects related to transition and employment services. Mr. Verstegen provides consultation and training in the areas of program development, performance management, marketing, and job development. Mr. Verstegen has developed curricula and provided training on supported and customized employment for a wide range of universities and state agencies. He has also provided field-based technical assistance to hundreds of employment consultants and transition specialists throughout the country in the area of job development and employer partnership. Given his business background, and having been an employer, Mr. Verstegen has focused his research, writing, and trainings on the provision of employment services to the employer community. Mr. Verstegen has his master's in business administration from the University of Wisconsin at Madison and is currently the president of the board of directors of the Association of Community Rehabilitation Educators, known as ACRE. Without further ado, we introduce you to Mr. Dale Verstegen.
Thank you, Daryl. That was a great introduction. You got a great radio voice too. Now you got to listen to my scratchy voice for the rest of the webinar. I want to thank everybody who is on with us today for this webinar. It's a three-part webinar series, and the purpose of this webinar is twofold. One is to share information based on a recent Department of Labor Office on Disability Employment Policy research project that I participated in, that specifically looked at economic benefits and impact for the services that we provide, particularly including customized employment. And then the second purpose of it is really to try to make some useful benefits of this research for you as practitioners and folks working with employers. So the webinar series is, as I mentioned earlier, 3 parts, and this first one is really going to be looking at the study itself and what we learned from that study, but I'm also going to try to make this information as applicable to you as is possible in terms of your communication and collaboration with employers. And what we think this first webinar does is really set up the next 2, which is once you have this information, we want to kind of give you some additional strategies, some additional techniques for approaching and particularly developing what we hope are long-range partnerships with employers. And based on the information you learned today, we're hoping that you'll have more reasons, more types of services that you can use to work with employers and develop and maintain those relationships with employers. And then the third and final part of the series is really helping you when you do work with these employers to really get information comparable to what we got. So in other words, this is national information based on employers that we were able to access. We want to kind of bring that down to the employers that you're working with and really kind of provide you with some tools and some ways to assess your services with the employers that you're working with. And we think that's an important element of an employer partnership, is that assessing of what benefits you and your organization might be providing to the employers in your community. So information about the study and how we've learned so far in terms of how we benefit employers, helping you to use that information to approach and establish long-term partnerships, and then lastly, help you assess the benefits and impact of the services that you're providing to employers. So, and then I just want to spend a minute too before I get into the meat of this presentation as part of the introduction to just kind of talk about how, at least for myself, how I got here to this webinar today. As Daryl mentioned in my introduction, I have experience as an employer, hiring folks, recruiting and hiring folks, training and developing those folks. I happen to have worked in the telecommunications industry. And then went back and received my MBA, and it was shortly after doing that I started to work as a business consultant around employment services for people with disabilities in the state of Wisconsin, and was working for the Wisconsin Department of Commerce, and did a lot of economic development around targeting jobs for people with disabilities. That really kind of got me into doing a lot of job development training. And also in the introduction, what Daryl mentioned was the opportunity that I've had to really work with job developers throughout the country in terms of going with them and meeting with employers in their communities. And by far, that's the most satisfying part of my job, is that opportunity to work with other employment specialists, but to do so along with the working directly with employers. And I found that to be a very rich experience, a very rewarding experience. And it really concerns me that we've had, significant turnover in the employment staff that we have. And I think one of the reasons for that, and having this chance to work with so many different job developers, is this concern that the job developers have when it comes to working with employers. I'm taking up too much of their time. I don't want to bother them. I don't want to tell them how to do their work. After all, this is their company. They have established HR policies and practices. Who am I to come in here and suggest that they maybe do something differently? It's a lot of fear, a lot of trepidation in terms of, introducing myself, the no's that we get, the rejection that just comes naturally with having to approach people you don't know. In this case, employers in your community. So what I really hope will happen from this webinar series is that you will have more information, validated information from employers that says what we're doing is of value to those employers. And what I'm hoping is if you get a better understanding of the value you bring to working with employers, and if you see that your work with employers can actually have an impact, a positive impact on those businesses, their operations, their HR policies and practices, then we're hoping that that gives you additional confidence, maybe a higher comfort level when it comes to working with those employers. So that's what we're really hoping to accomplish with this. We do provide evaluations for these webinars, and would very much like to have your feedback as to does this information, particularly throughout the series, does it help you to be a little more comfortable and confident in your work with employers? So for today, we're going to be talking about the study, and I'll talk a little bit about its design, and then what economic impact means. We'll describe what that economic impact and benefits have been for employers, particularly as it relates to the services that we provide, and how employers see those services that we provide. And then the last part of it is to really drill down specifically on customized employment. When I proposed this research study to Department of Labor Office on Disability Employment Policy, that was one of their requests. It says, yes, we want to know about how our services benefit employers, but we most specifically want to understand more about, does customized employment in fact have an impact on these businesses and their operations? And so that's the fourth objective of this, is to talk about the impact and benefits specifically of customized employment as well. Slide 9. So when we look at the overview of this study, you can see who sponsors it, and the fact that the funding for this really came through the Employment First State Leadership Mentoring Program, EFSLMP. That's part of ODEP. That is all around Employment First. There's almost 30 states that have benefited from Employment First, and our work with different states around policies as well as capacity building. And it was felt that the objective of this study and the perspective of those employers would really kind of help promote this concept of Employment First, and hopefully increase our capacity to work with specific employers and demonstrate this benefit that other employers have already talked about and is shared through the study that we've conducted. Slide 10. So one of the things that we want to make sure you understand is what this impact is, what that really means. So for the study, we consider economic impact to be that estimate or description of changes in the business's revenue, profits, personal wages, jobs, job duties, based on an economic event. And for this study, we're defining economic events as when employers try something new, either customized employment. It could be something as simple as they agreed to work with you and your particular organization when it comes to the recruitment and hiring of individuals with disabilities. And the presence of your organization within their business is, in fact, an economic event. There was a before, there was while you work with them, and there was an after. And that's really what it is we wanted to analyze with that economic impact. We wanted to measure, okay, the event is the incorporation of a job employment specialist or job developer who came into a particular business, learned about that business, shared information about what it is they can do, and possibly about specific job seekers. And that event does have an impact. It can be negative or it can be positive. And employers were also quick to share when they have an economic event. It can have an impact, and it isn't always necessarily positive. And so when we don't do a good job when it comes to working with employers, we can do damage, we can do harm, and make it harder to work with those particular businesses in the future. So all the more reason we need employment specialists to be properly trained, and we need those employment specialists to kind of understand how they need to approach and effectively work with these employers so that you can have a positive economic impact. Slide 11. So when we did the study, we used focus groups, and we could have done surveys. We chose this medium in terms of gathering information because we really wanted that interaction between the employers. We thought that different employers obviously are going to have different experiences with provider organizations and specific individuals with disabilities, and that opportunity to kind of share what their experiences were. It allowed us to really kind of in real time kind of see where they were in agreement or where their experiences were different. And it allowed them to kind of share some of these concepts between themselves. And that really did work well. We got some really good, brisk conversations going between the employers that were involved in these focus groups. And out of that came information that we simply couldn't have gotten if we would have done individual surveys with each of these folks. So we conducted these focus groups in Iowa and in Maryland, and we picked those two states because they were employment first states, and we felt that they might have been a little bit further along when it comes to the implementation of customized employment and the promotion of community employment services, particularly through the employment first initiatives that were taking place in both of those states. Next, slide 12, please. And so we use the specific selection criteria to pick these employers. We started with state agencies that referred us to specific provider organizations. We explained the study to those provider organizations. It asked for recommendations of employers that they thought might qualify and have something to say about the impact of their services that they've received. They gave us employer names. We vetted those employers by calling them and doing a quick interview and talking about the study and what we are hoping to accomplish with the study, and making sure that they in fact felt that there was some economic benefit, some impact of the services that they received. And when that happened, then we would invite them to participate in the focus group. And what we are looking for is people who are experienced an operational or economic benefit, and so that was what we were asking them about. They worked directly with one or more employment service providers and had folks from those providers have people placed within their particular workplace. We wanted to see if they have had experience with a customized job. And a lot of people say, oh, we do customized employment, but sometimes when we ask more questions and kind of drill down in terms of the kind of job that they may have placed them in, there could have been some variance in the duties that they did, but it doesn't always mean that it's truly a customized job. And so we use the definition that is provided through the Office on Disability Employment Policy about what customized employment is, and we use that criteria. Particularly, it meant that it was a position that no one was in before. It was a position that was derived based on the work of an employment program and specifically an employment specialist, and that the duties that were defined as part of that customized job were duties that were uniquely beneficial to an employer and their operation, not just duties that happen to be duties that the job candidate could do. So we really wanted to see, were these duties customized to benefit the employer? And if it did, then again, then those are the employers we wanted to talk to for this study. And that the person that was participating in the focus group did play a major role in the hiring, approval to hire, and the customizing of one or more jobs within their particular company. So I want to stop here, and because this particular slide is one that we would like you to pay particular attention to, particularly when we get to the third webinar that we're going to be doing, when we're going to talk about the fact that you could conduct similar kinds of either interviews or maybe even focus groups within your communities. We want you to pay attention to, how many possible employers would you have that might meet this selection criteria? And of course, the more you have that meet this selection criteria, I think the more exciting it may be for you to be able to do something similar to what we did, but within your own community. I also want to stop here and tell you that we really want this to be as useful for you as is possible, this webinar. And because we have, we're going to break the 100-person mark here in a minute or two, and because of that, we can't really just open the lines and have a discussion, even though I would love to do that. So in lieu of that, we really want you to use the chat box. And what we'd love you to do is really just ask any and all questions that you may have related to what you're hearing. if you have examples, or if you have even something that you hear that you say, I don't necessarily agree with that, I think that's all good. That's all good grist for the mill in terms of our discussions about employers. And so please put all of that type of information, any type of information that's germane to this webinar, in the chat box, because what we're going to do is we're going to, towards the end of this, we're going to leave time to really try to address some of those questions and comments. And my colleague and host Daryl is really going to be kind of monitoring this so that he can kind of help share the questions that you guys have. But also what we're going to offer you is all of those questions and that information we're going to put into a document, and I will respond to those questions. And so the questions, my responses, and the other comments that you all have will be sent back out to you. So because we're going to be together for 3 webinars, and because we hope is this opportunity to kind of you share some information as well and ask questions, and I can answer those later. We kind of look at this as a bit of a community of practice, you know, at least for these couple months between these webinars, you know, we're all going to be kind of working together, focusing on employers, and which I think is really important for our field, is to really kind of shine that light on these employers. These employers are as much a customer of the employment services that we provide as the folks with disabilities that we also support and represent. And I think we don't really focus our attentions enough on that other customer. And so I think this is a golden opportunity to do that. And so please offer up as much information and questions as all possible to kind of help make this community of practice, these webinars, helpful. And if you have a question, I can guarantee you there's other ones that are on this webinar that will have similar questions that they may not ask. So please contribute. Okay, slide 13, please. So these were the types of employers that we had, and you can see the types of companies. It's a nice mix. There were some manufacturing types of organizations, small, medium, and large types of organizations. You had medical representation from the medical field. So we were really happy with the kind of the mix of employers and types of positions. You can see a number of different people with human resource backgrounds, and they are an important client of ours, and the services that we provide. Slide 14. So the characteristics, so after we completed these focus groups, we went back and looked at those positions that you saw there. And one of the things that we asked ourselves is, what were the common characteristics of these folks? I mean, there was a criteria that we used to try to select people that we wanted to come to the focus groups, but this kind of speaks to, well, what did we get? Who were in these focus groups, and what is characteristically, what is it that they represented that will help us do our job better in the future? So I'm really excited to be able to kind of connect the makeup of the folks that we ended up vetting and participating in these focus groups to also be folks that had experience with one or more employment service providers over an extended period of time, a number of years. And it employed a number of people with disabilities over time. And so really, I think the strong message to all of you is the investment in these employers as a customer to get to the point where we have worked with them over an extended period of time. What that really tells us is if you can maintain that working relationship with that employer, you will in fact have opportunities for multiple placements. And a lot of times I think one of the biggest mistakes we make as employment programs is we place somebody into a job and we think we're done. You know, we did our job. We pat ourselves on the back, and you should, but we move on. Who's the next person and who's the next employer for that particular person? And so I think we don't necessarily circle back and see that the services that we have to offer are over and above and beyond just the placement of a specific individual into that company. There is other reasons and ways that you can maintain those relationships with employers post-placement of an individual with a disability. And if you do that, you have the opportunity to get multiple hires. And that each of these folks work with an employment specialist who understood and could articulate the concepts of customized employment and had success matching job candidates to those tasks and to the environment of those in that particular workplace. And so I think that's a real kind of deeper dive. That's a different level of relationship with an employer. Because in order to really place somebody into a customized job, you really do have to understand their overall operation to the point where you could recommend specific tasks that benefited their company. And then when they benefited from that customized job and they saw that as a positive experience for them, we find that that can take on a life of its own. That once they understand the concept of customized employment and they see that as a way to benefit their overall operation, and if you maintain that relationship with that employer, again, together they come up with additional employment opportunities. And a lot of times those are customized opportunities as well. So in other words, once they get it and value it, it gives you additional opportunity to work with that employer. The employers that we had in these focus groups, because it wasn't a well-established, long-standing relationship with those employers became internal champions. And they saw these concepts as benefiting their organization, and they saw applications for these concepts to benefit their organization, and subsequently hiring additional people with disabilities. And that they really did understand more effectively that what we are representing is an alternative source of labor, and that additional source of labor not only gets some tasks done, some jobs done that the employer needs, but it has a positive impact on the culture and the overall operation and the bottom line of those businesses that they work with. And these employers were very articulate about what they saw as the impact in culture, operation, and their bottom line. And you're going to hear about that as part of this webinar. And that they and then one of the things that we were very curious about was the employers that really got and embraced customized employment and developed those long-term partnerships with an employment provider. Also tended to be organizations that used total quality improvement processes. And what we mean by that is ISO is an example of a total quality improvement process. Lean is another type of methodology for quality improvement. Six Sigma is another method of implementing quality improvement processes. And in all of those cases, what they're basically challenging themselves is, where is the waste? Where is the inefficiencies? Where and how can we as a business, whether it be a service business or a manufacturing or a distribution, whatever kind of business it is, it can benefit from improving their operation. And when they do, and they see that customized employment is really the same as that. And then so if they understand it and they're implementing that anyways, then they tend to understand and appreciate the concept of customized employment. And they tend to find very creative ways to use their quality improvement processes to identify additional opportunities that can in fact benefit job candidates with disabilities. So what I think that means, I think, for you all is ask that question when you're talking to employers. You know, do you engage in any type of quality improvement processes? It tends to be businesses. There are some small businesses that also adopt these practices, but it tends to be more the medium or a little bit larger types of companies that use that. The investment pays off better. What we also learned is when they are a smaller company and they don't necessarily formally get trained in these areas of quality improvement, it creates opportunities for us to help them with quality improvement processes. And that's, I think, a better way for us to see customized employment. This isn't customized employment from an employer's perspective, isn't a strategy to place people with more significant barriers to employment and to help some of the folks that are harder to place. I mean, those are kind of concepts and motivations that we have when it comes to using the concepts of customized employment. But for them, it's, can I make my business operation more efficient? Can I make my business operation more impactful, generate more sales, possibly cost efficiencies? And so that's something that employers, that's how employers think. That's what they're looking for. And we definitely have things to offer them in that regard. Okay, slide 15. So these are the overall findings that we came on when we did this. Reduced cost. They were able to articulate the fact that the services we have to offer reduce their cost in recruiting, hiring, and training their employees. Obviously, the folks that we place, but you'll see that they actually saw the services that we have to offer to reduce costs in recruiting, hiring, in some cases, and training for other employees that do not have a disability. So our services benefit their overall business, not just the individual that we happen to place in their business. They talked about reduced turnover and absenteeism and how and why that's important. Improved workplace culture, opportunities to expand placements, opportunities for advancement of employees with disabilities, and increased productivity. So what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to start with the findings that were more applicable to the general employment services that we have to offer. And then I'll finish on the findings that were more specific to customized employment, even though I will address customized employment in various parts of these findings. Okay, so that's the overall results, findings of the study, and then I'm going to go into the specifics of some of these now. So with that, please go to slide 16. Nope. Yep. Okay, so reduce cost. What they learned was that job developers can create opportunities for employers to make better job matches, resulting in savings of employer time and resources in the hiring. And I don't think this is probably news to you, but the folks that we tend to place tend to outlast other folks that they place into their business, especially if it happens to be a more entry-level kind of position. And that employers reported significant cost savings, that when somebody stays versus goes, it saves them time and money in recruiting, hiring, and training. Turnover is the bane of any company, especially in a tight labor market, especially in lower paying types of jobs, including part-time positions. And that they indicate that it takes 8 to 12 weeks to replace somebody if they're if somebody gives notice. So somebody gives notice at a business, they got to expect 8 to 12 weeks to refill that position, and at a cost of $3,000 to $7,000, depending on the type of industry and the amount of effort that they have to put towards recruiting, screening, hiring, and then training and supporting those folks that they place. And that's for anybody that they hire. So you can imagine if you're putting people in there that are lasting longer, you're reducing their turnover rates. And that does have a direct cost benefit to those businesses. And those are some estimates that they've given us about that. And these are great numbers to share with employers as to how and why it benefits to work with you in your particular employment program. And that those vacant positions, 8 to 12 weeks, that's a long time. And if that position's vacant, it has an impact, a negative impact on their overall productivity and the job satisfaction of their coworkers. Because when people are missing, people have to fill in. And when they have to fill in, that takes them away from what they were possibly originally intended to do and paid to do. And so morale and efficiency of the overall business is significantly impacted when they have unfilled positions. And so you can help with that in terms of focusing on the hiring and training of new employees. You know, you can supplement the need, reduce their turnover, but also in some cases we've been able to put people in positions that kind of make the pain of those vacant positions less, because we can do some of the critical tasks that might need to be done by the folks in those vacant positions, freeing other employees to do things that might be of a higher impact, higher levels of productivity for that particular business. And so inefficiency, dissatisfaction occurs when higher paid employees have to fill in for lower skilled tasks. And that's another great example of a question that you can ask the employers when it comes to what's happening when you have vacant positions. How do you handle that? What's the impact of that? And making it clear that you can help them with that issue, that problem that they have. So next slide, 17, kind of just gives you some direct quotes. So this was all these findings came from the employers. This isn't Dale Verstegen saying this is what I think our benefits are to employers. This is what employers are telling Dale Verstegen. So somebody helps you match the jobs. Quality hire, I would say, is improved. And so you can see there, they don't talk about the fact that they have a disability. They're saying this person is of a higher quality hire, a better job match than they can do. And there's a lot of reasons why we, in fact, can do a better job of matching and hiring. And when we do, the disability aspects of this, especially if it's a good match and especially if supports are provided on the job, we are more competitive than their average applicant for a job. And I think it's important that we position ourselves that way. We put additional time and effort into ensuring good quality job matches. And for that reason, it's to you, the employer's benefit, to work with me, the employment program or employment specialist. And it says here, I mean, I wouldn't hire a professional recruiter to fill entry-level positions, but if they did, it would cost a lot of money. And the fact is they don't, and they have to do it themselves. So that is something that we offer, that they recognize as a way to supplement their recruiting and hiring process. And if you're a small business, you don't necessarily even have an HR. So as you can see, this is a business manager at a vet clinic. And she was saying, you know, I'm not HR, but I have to do HR because we don't have an HR department. We're a small company. So what we do really helps supplement what they don't have in the area of HR. And she says it's not our background. So being able to hire somebody with quality that do specific labor needs matches a lot of the times is a plus. And then another employer said it's an increasing available workforce, increasing the available labor, and that is, of course, of a benefit to them. Okay, slide 18. So the next one is reduced turnover and absenteeism. And then, again, very consistently, all the employers reported higher attendance, better retention for the folks that we place. The savings in terms of benefits and costs to retain new employees is better when they have than the rates in terms of people with disabilities. and that it does have a direct reduction in their turnover when we obviously place people that don't turn over as quickly. And employers have tracked the cost of hiring these new folks, and they would quantify those annual savings in hiring costs due to a more stable workforce. And that when they do hire folks with disabilities, the employees and coworkers find benefit in this as well. And what they're basically saying is that morale improves for the overall organization when there's less turnover, because everybody in a company gets taxed when somebody doesn't show up for work, when somebody quits, when they have vacant positions. Okay, slide 19. So here's some additional quotes. And I won't read all this to you, but you can see it up on the screen. They see it as an investment when they make accommodations. And so I think that's the trade-off that the employer sees, is they say, okay, these folks come in, they need accommodations, which they consider job coaching to be one of those. And that investment is how they see how and why they get lower turnover. They invest in both you as an employment program, they spend some time with you. They invest in these individuals because they know they need some additional supports on the job. And for what that investment is, they get that return, i.e. lower turnover, higher job retention. And for the repetitive job, and then what this was basically saying is it's no picnic hiring people for entry-level jobs, semi-skilled types of jobs. The overall available workforce for those types of folks means that they have to do a lot of training. They have a lot of what they would consider babysitting that they have to do. And that, in fact, the jobs that some of the folks, if we place them in and it's well matched, they're excited about doing that work. And they're probably working alongside several others who aren't as excited about doing that kind of work. And so what these employers are saying is it pays to work with programs like ours because these folks want to be there. And they set a better example for those that are less enamored, who are just there because they want the money. So hiring entry-level positions, high turnover types of jobs, the candidate pool is not all that good. And we, in fact, are very competitive in offering a better quality employee for those positions. That's what they're telling us. Slide 20. Culture and they linked, which I thought was really interesting, is the employers linked culture with retention. And what they said is the hiring of people with disabilities and customized jobs improves that work culture. I would say not even if it's not a customized job. If we bring in folks with disabilities, it's a more diverse workforce. They see that as a more enriched culture. It improves morale, and it improves communication. When they accommodate and support employees, what they consider to be with differing abilities, that communication, those efforts to support them, benefits the overall team, and it makes the company better because they have to change their communication style when they use different accommodations or jigs or different kinds of methods that we support. Those kinds of supports and accommodations tend to trickle into the organization, and they communicate more effectively with other coworkers. And what we see too is the way we train and orient new staff so that they can be successful on the job, especially when we use task analysis, systematic instruction, that if we share that with the employer, they use those same supports for other entry-level positions that also want to learn and need to learn that job. So the techniques and the methodologies that we use to make employees with disabilities successful can be used to make anybody successful on a job. And so that's another reason that they should use our services and take advantage of our expertise. The presence of people with disabilities and customized jobs help morale, and I think it is because they're supplementing tasks that other people that have maybe been there longer, higher skilled, higher paid, are able to be supported. And that's how those coworkers see it. Bring in a customized position that supports the other workers to help them be more productive. They see that as an investment in them, not just an investment in this person with a disability. They see it as an investment in themselves because they're being recognized for the contributions that they make, and they're taking some tasks away from them that allow them to have a greater impact in their job. And so that's what these employers are saying. There's a trickle effect of these customized jobs, or even, I would say, even just a person filling a position that others fill and has a disability. That person in with them changes the culture, changes communication, and improves retention. And they're saying retention not just of the people we place, but retention of the other people that are working there as well. Slide 21. So this is their quotes. We hired more people with disabilities. We were working together better as a company. Another person said it changed our wiring synapses. We don't exist. That didn't exist before we hired this person with a disability. We're all communicating better now. And the other thing is when coworkers saw these people that we're placing as making a positive contribution, they all wanted to be part of that success. And so that really, what that tells us is when we have a positive impact on culture, it not only has a positive impact on retention, but what we're also doing is fostering natural supports. To me, a great definition for natural supports is coworkers who want to be a part of the folks that we place in their success. In the corporate, another quote was, we talk diversity, you know, it's a check mark, it's a compliance type of thing, but they don't, these particular employers don't look at it that way. It heightens their morale. It has an impact on turnover for people without disabilities. If people like coming to work, they stay. If they dislike their job, they quit. So if we can bring in people that have a positive impact on culture, what we're also saying is it can have a positive impact on morale and teamwork. Slide 22. So what we also learned was that these employers who incorporated these different practices and these were these internal champions, once you had somebody that understood what we did, saw benefit in what it is we do, they don't want to just stop there. So they want to continue that. So they will, in fact, hire additional folks. We also learned that, particularly with customized employment, it has a particular additional benefit for employees that might have been sick and out a really long time, people who have been maybe away for military duty and have come back, other employees where customizing a job. We saw a benefit with older workers that instead of quitting altogether and retiring, they could use some of those workers and the knowledge and the institutional knowledge that they had into customized jobs that would more benefit the overall operation based on what they know. And so they find, you know, once they find something that has a positive benefit on their company, they run with it. And it also works for folks on workman's comp. If they can put them into a customized job, instead of paying workman's comp, they can get them back onto the job. So they see economic benefits in all of these categories once they understand these concepts and apply them universally. Slide 23. What they said about that was, if someone got hurt or sick, you said they know the numbers. You know, it's 5%. Somebody gets hurt and sick, gets on Social Security. Only about 5% come back to work, and there's a time window. If they don't come back within those 30 days, there's a chance they won't come back at all. That applies to workman's comp or any type of injury or illness that coworkers have. If they can do job sharing, flex the tasks, then a lot of those, they can keep a lot of those folks and the skills and knowledges that they have. Another upside of the focus is that they might be injured. They can be placed on light duty. Those flexible job tasks, lost time is reduced, having a direct impact economically on those businesses. And other tasks we teed up and ready, and what that person's saying, I have other tasks for customized, because they get it. What they find is they don't necessarily find employees with disabilities to do something. So now they bought in. They understand customized employment. They see all kinds of opportunities for customized employees. But some of these employers, these employers who have been successful with it, have said, you know, the employment specialists that I work with had left the employment program, and no one that I know have come back to talk to us. So in a number of cases, these employers, based on staff turnover within the employment programs, have lost those partnerships. They have actually reduced the ability to maintain those employer partnerships because of turnover at the employment programs. So sometimes these employers are saying, I don't have a provider. I have opportunities, but I don't have a provider to work with to supply me with potential job candidates. And then this other person basically said the same thing. I'd like to get some additional help from an employment specialist to identify and utilize additional customized employment jobs. So my point is, once you have a strong partnership and an internal champion, you no longer have to job develop. Then I think it's a matter of maintaining that relationship with the employer and working together about other opportunities to improve their overall operation. And then I think what I find with employment programs is when you have that relationship with an employer, it becomes a supply problem. And you may not have, they might have opportunities for additional customized jobs, but the job match is important. And if you don't have somebody that matches to those tasks or that environment, you can't just place anybody in there, right? That's where we go wrong, is we try to do that. And that's when it blows up in our face. So that's where working with other provider organizations or working with the local VR agency to help them to fill some of these additional opportunities, even if it isn't from somebody from your caseload, is an important role that you might end up having to play to maintain that ongoing partnership with that particular employer. Slide 24. So the other thing we found is that they place somebody into a job, and they tend to, if it works, if it's a good match, they tend to give them additional tasks, increase their hours, because this person's contributing and contributing effectively. So that was the other thing that they were telling us, is that they find benefit, and when they find somebody that they value, they'll give them more in different tasks, increase their hours, and help them to advance, give them additional training, offer them additional skills. And that they've found that some of these folks have increased their hours to the point where they're now more self-sufficient. Okay, next slide, 25. And the employers kind of quoted that differently. Been here about 6 months, putting hardware in the product. That's what we thought they could do initially. And that there was a bit of a slowdown. Robin said, hey, I can do that other work. And then they gave Robin those additional tasks, and in fact found that she was one of the best ones at doing those additional tasks. And sometimes we miss that opportunity. Sometimes when we place somebody, we just assume that's where they're going to be. We're busy trying to get other people jobs. But circling back and really looking at some additional job tasks, some additional customized types of tasks that might benefit the business, helping that person to advance and grow within those companies is also an important part of our job. It also strengthens that partnership when you come back around and help that person make additional contributions with new tasks, maybe more hours over time. And then somebody else talked about that they provide follow-up training and that additional training helped that person to be more valuable to the company over time. Slide 26. Increased productivity. So these are the slides that are just specific to customized employment. If somebody's in a already established position, then they can be more productive than another person doing those tasks. But what we really wanted to learn from this study is when you create these new jobs, when you have a job that no one had before that, it's a job that's structured based on a positive impact on the operation of that particular business, that increased productivity can have an overall effect on their operation. So we wanted to learn more about that. We wanted to learn, if we put people in the customized jobs, what are some of the ways that there's some economic impact on their business? And they in fact said that yes, there was an increase in productivity when they used customized employment, and they described it possibly differently than we would, but removing low-skilled tasks from existing employees and allowing employees to focus on their required higher-skilled types of jobs and duties and priorities, offered entry-level positions can now take over those tasks. They reduced the hours. In this case, it reduced hours per unit. In other words, they were able to produce more units in less time, and they were able to do that because of the incorporation of a customized position. And that there was cost savings in terms of contracting labor, use of temp agencies, and overtime, because those are the sorts of things that people had to do over and above their other required job duties. And so they would do it in overtime situations, or they would, during peak times, they would use temp agencies. And in some cases, they've been able to reduce contract workers based on customized employment positions that they were able to put in place. Slide 27. So this is how they described that. It was the right person, or the right job for the right person at the right level. And we're able to parse out a job. We haven't dumbed down the job. I think sometimes that's what some people think about customized positions. You know, it's just those things that are the simplest things that need to be done. That's not necessarily the case. Everybody has a quota, and that applies to these customized jobs as well, and that they found it to be an effective corporate-wide strategy using those same metrics. So you establish, you know, what the productivity level needed to be for the customized jobs, and how those jobs can positively impact the other parts of the operation. Repetitive type of work wasn't trivial work. It's really important, but it in some cases might be something that other employees aren't giving their full attention to because it is repetitive, and they may not enjoy it as much, or find that to be a less desirable part of their job. It was labor needs assessments that really helped identify those tasks, and it was, interestingly, in the HR and the accounting departments. And in those departments, they freed up those higher paid individuals, and that what they were using in those accounting and HR departments were temps. And so they were able to identify, well, what did you have? Because that's essentially what temp agencies are. They're kind of like brought in for customized types of jobs over very specific time periods. And the difference being, though, is that they pay a premium for every hour that somebody works through a temp agency. They're paying about 30 to 40% more to have somebody do that task. We bring in a customized position to do that. They pay the commensurate wage for that particular task. So right there's a positive economic impact for those businesses. If you pay away the task from you focused on, and you come back to it in 10 minutes, how much longer does it take you to get back up to speed? If you're really looking at it closely as you can, and so that's where they say, maybe the quality isn't quite right for some of those repetitive tasks, especially if they're interrupted and having to come back and do some of those repetitive tasks. So what if those repetitive tasks can be just taken away so that they don't have to be interrupted and they can just focus on the other aspects of their job? What is the overall benefit of that? And so what they said is it increased productivity, but it also increased quality. And so that's an important consideration when you're looking for customized jobs. Not only how can we help them be more productive, but what might we do that actually makes them produce a better quality product or service. Also very exciting opportunities when it comes to using customized employment strategies. Slide 28. Increased the assembly line efficiency, it improved hours per cabinet. And then they put that into an overall dollar amount. And that is also subtracting out the cost of having somebody in that customized position. And less complaints by the co-workers because they have somebody to do that specific job. And I love the quote, you get a specialist at a generalist price. So we have them doing very specialized tasks, but they get paid what other people who do more general types of tasks around the business do. So they see that as a benefit, a cost saving, cost savings. And then back to Robin, she did this installation. The saw operators' productivity went up 25%. And they saw, obviously, by breaking that task out, giving it to Robin, they saved 25% in terms of productivity. And if you add that up over every day, week, month that Robin works, that's a long-term economic benefit for that particular company, just based on coming up with Robin's position and putting her in there. It reduced overtime costs. It went from 24% to 13%. And they have an analyzed savings related to that cost savings. And about a 75% reduction in overtime. In the finishing departments, we're invested heavily in some of the employees who need workplace supports. And again, that's how they see it. They say you invest in these employees in those finishing departments, reducing the overtime, but the cost of that, the investment, is the use of these workplace supports. What's nice about that is those workplace supports are also not paid directly by those employers, but through programs like you're part of. Reduced turnover by which caused them a savings of 38,000. Overtime 24 to 13 for a savings of 54.41. Training time to competency went from 3 weeks on the job to 2. And time to fill those positions reduced to 2 weeks. Each one of those has an economic benefit to those companies, and they were able to measure that very specifically. This was a particular HR person who really bought into customized employment and actually took the time and effort to kind of put these measures in place. And he had to do so to justify the employing of people with disabilities. He also, by the way, applied these same strategies to refugee populations, that where English was a challenge and where they needed other kinds of workplace supports. And what that allowed them to do is what they called, it was basically a workplace innovation effort, where they were looking at alternative sources of labor that came with the need for support, but benefited these companies and saved them money long-term in the areas that is listed on that slide. Next slide, 29. So what I'm hoping is that you guys have had a chance to type in some questions. If not, please do so now. I'm just going to spend a little bit more time on some of the conclusions of this, but then I'd like to kind of get at some of your questions. And again, whatever we aren't able to get to, I'll try to put into a document, respond to those questions, and get that back all out to all of you. But we did, we felt the study was successful. We did able to identify and actually measure economic impact for the hiring of individuals, particularly including using customized employment. We did see decreases in hiring costs, training costs, reductions in turnover and absenteeism. We saw a positive impact in terms of workplace culture, and we saw increases in productivity. One of the reasons I was really excited to have the opportunity to do this study was the fact that I've seen a lot of employer panels, particularly during conferences. Those employers are people who feel good about the fact that they've hired folks with disabilities. There is a real human interest story. It's unusual for them possibly to have hired folks like we represent, and so they want to talk about that. And I think it's really good that they do. But to get employers engaged who have not had that experience, it's not the human story of this person having a disability and achieving employment is what really motivates employers to work with you. So what I think what really gets their attention is opportunities to generate revenue, reduce costs, improve productivity and efficiency. And so we think that having some of this evidence, some of these quotes, some of these estimates that you could share with others are ways to really get the attention of those employers to the point where you can have that ongoing working relationship with these employers. Do they see the economic benefit of what it is you do? And if they do, you're more likely to be able to establish a partnership. And if you have partners that you're currently working with, strongly encourage you to ask them the kind of questions that we asked so that you can define the impact and the benefits of your services, especially if you've been using customized employment strategies. Okay, slide 30. So what we're going to do next is, like I said, July 9th, we're going to talk about how best to approach and develop those ongoing partnerships. Again, we being Transcend have a lot of ideas about how to do that. What you're going to hear, though, at this webinar is what these employers' ideas were for how best to approach them and how best to establish these partnerships. And then again on August 6th, we're going to kind of talk about how might you be able to establish the benefits and the impact of your programs with your businesses. And then we think in that one, we're also going to talk about what can you do with your information that you get in terms of the positive impact you've had with the employers, customers that you work with, and how can you take that and develop additional partnerships with other employers in your community. So that's what's coming up. Next slide. These are some great resources if you aren't aware of them. The Lead Center has some great stuff on particularly customized employment. And the ODEP EFSLMP initiative, which I mentioned, funded this particular study. They have 2 websites that I think are just full of really great resources, particularly related to customized employment, but also related to employment first. I also want to mention that they were real pleased with the outcome of that study last year, and so they did commission a second study, and we're currently just wrapping up the focus groups in different parts of the country this year. And this year, the focus is on working with folks with that are part of the mental health employment programs around the country, as well as veteran-related employment programs and customized employment. So they've added some additional kind of target groups that we want to kind of research what employers think about the employment services that they're getting. And so stay tuned. There will be an additional a round of information around economic benefit and impact, particularly related to those target groups. All right, next slide. And that's me, and that's my contact information. And I sincerely offer that out. If you would have any questions or you want some additional information of any kind, if I can be of assistance to you, please let me know. So with that, Daryl, could you maybe see if we have any kind of questions, or I'm seeing a few myself, but what I want to check in with you first.
All right. So thank you so much, Dale. Great presentation. Our first question basically speaks to, are slides going to be made available? And I can answer that based on the email that everyone received that participated in today's session. The information contained in the link to the presentation, you'll be able to get your handouts and slides based on that information. Now, question number 2, Dale, is one that's quite interesting. It says, is there a national list of employers who hire people for customized employment?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is no. One of the most interesting aspects of this study was the recruitment of these employers. And what we found is, even with programs that have said, yeah, we've been doing customized employment for a long time, when we asked them which of those employers would say there's been a economic impact or benefit of those services and those jobs, and can we talk to them about it, the number of employers that they give us is very small. And then when we contact those employers, some of them are not necessarily specific to that criteria that I showed you in the beginning of the webinar. So to answer your question, no. But let me just put this into a way that I think might be useful to all of you. When we talk to employment programs, they're not necessarily keeping good track of the employers that they do have partnerships with. It tends to be being kept track of by the individual employment specialists. And the relationships seem to be with very specific employment specialists. And when those employment specialists leave, a lot of that information and those relationships seem to go as well. And so what we're finding is employment programs need to do a really good job of understanding who their employer customers are and which ones of those are customized jobs, so that we can start to have such a database. But more importantly, you can use that to maintain those working relationships. How do you if you're a new employment specialist, how do you maintain a relationship that was developed by some of your predecessors if you don't have good information about who these employers are and what kind of services and placements we've had with them? So I kind of turn the question and say, it's really programs like yours that have to really kind of, because VR also does not keep track of that. We're encouraging VR agencies to be a depository for which of your, and now that they're starting to develop customized employment referral services that they can refer to, we're hoping that they will start to kind of collect that information, but they haven't been. We've known some programs that did some wonderful customized employment, but the people that did that wonderful customized employment work are gone. And what we're finding is we don't have good access to those employers once those employment specialists leave. The question I saw come in was just around this notion of, how do I know if I have an employer that is somebody that meets that criteria? And I think it really kind of comes down to, have you worked with that organization over an extended period of time? Do they understand your services in its broadest sense? And do they see what you do for them as ultimately saving them time and money? because the only way they can get to seeing what you're doing as saving them with time and money, unfortunately, is they got to spend some time. They got to spend some time with you first. So they've got to kind of invest in this notion of detailed informational interview and learning about their business operation, and coming back and effectively presenting, not I have this person named Johnny or Sue and they can do this job for you, but really emphasizing the services that you have to offer and the reasons and why they should maintain this working relationship with you, because they can benefit from your services on an ongoing basis. So how do you know if you have somebody that would qualify for this kind of a study, or that you have that kind of a partnership with? Well, one, you just have to ask them. But two, you got to ask yourself first, have I had a benefit on this company? Have they placed one or more people? Have the matches been good matches? Has the person done a nice job in terms of the role that they play within that company? Do they see me as providing a source of labor in terms of recruiting and hiring? And do they see some of our other services as beneficial? Sometimes we go to these employers to do community-based assessments or work experiences. And we tell these employers that this will help this particular youth or adult in terms of their potential career. Well, when we tell them that, they see that they're doing us a favor. But what a lot of these employers have told us is the use of worksite tours, job shadows, the work community-based assessments, trial work experiences, any kind of work experience, they see that as an opportunity to recruit and hire and screen potential employees. So they like those services, but they have to be presented in a way that they see as beneficial to them. And that's what a lot of these employers told us during the focus groups, is we get to try this out. We get to try out this concept of customized employment because they authorized an OJT for 5 weeks or whatever period of time. And we got to see both the tasks that they're doing and whether those tasks benefit our company. We get to meet this person gets to meet us. We get to see if it's a good match. And so these become very effective employment services for fostering matches. And it's the sort of thing that an employer can't do themselves. They can't just ask somebody that they interview, well, why don't you come back for a trial work experience? And if that goes well, I may hire you. But with us, we have these additional tools. We have these additional services that these employers find beneficial. But it's really important that we share them in that respect. Daryl, anything else you got on your end?
Well, it seems like we've met the mark of really concluding our webinar for today. Dale, great job. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Just want to remind everyone that participated today that you will be receiving an evaluation to give us your input, your thoughts as to how we can improve our webinars that we will be having in the coming months. I really want to appreciate each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be a part of this very important employment engagement webinar that our distinguished guest and host, Dale Verstegen, gave us insight and knowledge into. There are some, just the upcoming webinars again will be on July 9th, 2019, from 2 to 3:30, approaching employers and developing long-term partnerships, and August 6, 2019, assessing the economic impact and benefit of your employment programs. For those of you that didn't get your questions answered, we will definitely make sure that Dale has those questions, and I'm sure that he will respond to you as well. Again, about Transcend, We are a national organization offering web-based and in-person training for state agencies, school districts, provider or organizations, and other interested meaningful work and community inclusion for individuals with disabilities. You can reach us at transcend.org or 301-424-2002. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.